All right, how's it going, y'all? Got another video with Frank, and we're just gonna kind of go over like the whole LAIC, however you say it, the disqualification that happened yesterday. And going to let Frank introduce himself.
What's up, everybody? My name's Franklin. Me and Larry haven't really been doing collaboration videos lately, but here we are.
Yeah, back again. So basically, this guy, YT retired overseas tour. He got disqualified at the tournament, and like he basically went straight to Twitter and was like, "Hey, give me a hat check." And so, just looking at the team, it's like the number one thing lately has been home trackers, and like you can just automatically look and see you might have home tracker issues with Urshifu, Rillaboom, and Tornadus. And so after that, he tagged a bunch of people, and Matt jumped in. If you don't know who Matt is, Matt's one of the, you can basically call him a dev for PKHeX, and he did a kind of like a hat check. And so he had shared OT data, underlying PKHeX trash bytes, all met on November 13th, no home trackers, which I pointed out, all cosmetic ribbons, 508 EVs, PP Max, all moves, and 6 IV legendaries. And so, like, just like looking at that list, the main thing you're gonna see is home trackers, but just with the conversation, it just kind of, I feel like a lot of people don't really take the time to like really like educate themselves on like ginning, and instead they kind of just like they go Twitter brained and kind of pick apart like what they see. Like what do you see on this list that kind of like stands out to you, Frank?
I think, well, just to give a little background for those who don't follow VGC, there's also Worlds, and Worlds was about a couple months ago. And there were a lot of people that were getting disqualified for basically it was the home tracker. And I don't really like we're not trying to give the participant like any slack because obviously, he got caught and really doing stuff like this even though, the Pokemon company has put their foot down saying, "Hey, if you get caught with our legality checkers or hack checks, like you're going to get kicked out. There's going to be no remorse." So, you know, again, if you I always stress this out, like if you're playing VGC or any official Pokemon tournament where there's money or championship points or qualifiers on the line, just don't even try to gen at all. Yes, you can save a lot of time by genning, but there's just a lot of misinformation when it comes to people getting their own Pokemon. Where are they getting their Pokemon from? How did they get that Pokemon? What tools or software they're using to get that Pokemon in the first place. And obviously, just looking at the list too, I mean, some of this stuff, me as someone who gens their Pokemon, like clearly, you know, a lot of stuff is very catchable for those who are very versed in PKHeX and how genning works. So again, it's just mostly them not really having a full understanding or not taking initiative of, hey, something is clearly wrong here. But of course, with the games are not going to tell you whether your Pokemon's legal or not. It comes down to legality checkers in PKHeX and also in VGC tournaments.
Yeah, and like the thing is, like you said, like if you're going to go to a tournament, like I'm fine with people ginning. It's just like use your brain. Like I think I saw like the prize was like $5,000 for top eight. If I've got $5,000 on the line and I'm in like a whole nother country, I've been like traveling all this stuff to earn the right to be there. I'm either not gonna gin or I'm gonna make sure I am on my shit. Like there's no way in hell I'm not going to be as informed about what I'm doing like with that much at stake. Like this isn't something where like you're like, okay, I'm just gonna go down the street to my local like game store and go have a tournament where like the prizes are different, the stakes are lower, but this is like you're literally at like a big stage and you're like you're making like these common mistakes. So it's like it's hard to really feel bad for people anymore. And like I saw a couple people they were like, oh, it's kind of unfair that VGC decides to wait until like I think this happened at like the second day or something like that. And somebody's like, "Oh, that's
Yeah,
kind of
day two.
unfair." Yeah, they're like, "Oh, it's kind of fair. Day two, you shouldn't do it then." But it's just like, it doesn't for me. It doesn't really matter when it happens because the main thing is that like you chose to break the rules, and it's just like I am fine with people ginning. And I think it's fine. I understand the arguments for it and against it, but it's just like if you're going to gin, make sure that you are on your shit. Like, do not do things where it's just like it's an easy flag, and especially like I know there's like a lot of stuff on this list, but the main thing is home trackers. There is so much time being spent on home trackers, so many things on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, everywhere, to even like go into a tournament and like have that home tracker issue going on. That really just shows that there's like a real lack of like kind of like general like education that goes in at these VGC events. Because I'm just like, you guys got to have like friends that are probably like telling you like, hey man, like don't do this. We don't want to see you get like banned and stuff. And like, what do you think about it, Frank?
Yeah, I think there's some sort of accountability for those who are participating, especially like you mentioned, if there's money or there's championship points, because I'm pretty sure if you win intercontinental competitions, that like literally pushes you into like qualification for worlds and stuff. So it's a pretty big deal for those who've been taking their time to do all this stuff. My thing, and giving away a secret, honestly, if you really need to gen at something like this, first of all, you're kind of crazy because I think the risk is more
Yeah.
or far more bigger than the reward. And two, if you're gonna gen a Pokemon, like let's say the Urshifu that I'm seeing on the screen right now, like just bring an Urshifu from Sword and Shield, not touched, and then you bring it to Scarlet and Violet. It'll have its home tracker. It's gonna have its stats and moves rearranged because that's how it works nowadays. And just gen the moves. Just give this Urshifu like a gold bottle cap. It's literally not that complicated. I don't understand why people who's been playing Pokemon for so long has been doing this genning stuff, whether they really are doing it or not. I don't understand why they're not getting it at this point. Like even for you and I, for example, like if we're doing giveaways, like we're not dumb. Like we know what's legal or
Yep.
what's not. We clearly see Pokemon that shouldn't have specific ribbons. Like let's say Urshifu having a Gen 6 like Pokemon contest ribbon. Like that doesn't make any sense. And then the 508 EVs, it's like, yeah, we clearly tell you're using the limit of EVs in PKHeX, but it's actually 510 in the actual games. And obviously, those little things just give away so much as to who the people really are when it comes to PKHeX. And then obviously, we see the Met date, November 13th. How? What a coincidence. I highly doubt you had a six, perfect team of Pokemon and you met it like a couple of days ago. Like we're not dumb. And I think for the VGC players, like they just got to be more responsible for what they're doing. Like assume your risk versus rewards, and clearly, like I said, the risk far outweighs more than rewards lately, especially what happened in Worlds. But also just be smart about what you're doing.
Yep. And like I'll kind of like go down the list a little bit and like address things. I know Frank touched on a few of them, but like shared OT data. So the thing that happened with this, with like the shared OT data, and like I said, not all of these things by themselves are something that are immediately red flag that you have a hacked Pokemon. But like just like I said, just to say, it's more so the totality of evidence. I think that's the right phrase. When you have all of these
Yeah.
things stacked together in combination with the automatic red flags, that's why these things are pointed out on the list. So like shared OT data. So like let's say I think this guy had stuff from like Scarlet, Violet, and Legends Arceus. They all had the exact same OT name, TID and SID. That's perfectly legal. However, it's one of those things that is highly improbable. So that's why that is on the list. And then you have underlying PKX trash bites. So how that happens, and this is stuff that you can't even check for yourself in game. You need PKX to really do this. That happens like let's say you have a Pokemon that you like make in PKX and the nickname is not the nickname, the OT is already PKX. So you change it to your OT and that leaves behind what is called trash bites. The same thing happens when like let's say you take like one of those Pokemon that are like in Wonder Trade and like you change the OT name to get it fixed or whatever, it leaves trash bites of that stuff. So like that's one of those things like a lot of people aren't aware of. Another thing, all met on November 13th. That's you can change your date to anything in the world, anything you want to. However, it's one of those things that just like in totality, seeing it, it's an automatic red flag to those of us that gen. And like me and Frank probably, and this isn't to sound arrogant, me and Frank probably understand genning more than 99% of the community. But then Matt, who's an actual dev, probably understands so much more than us. It's just like this video isn't really to take digs at people. It's just more to kind of like add clarity to like the fact that there's a lot of like lack of understanding, a lot of misinformation and stuff like that that goes around in regards to legality. And then obviously no home trackers. I mean, like there's so many videos about that. All cosmetic ribbons. It's further in the comments, but the Rillaboom that was on this guy's team, it was bred in Scarlet and Violet, but then it had ribbons for Sword and Shield, which is legal. But however, like I said, when I talk about totality, when you combine that with the fact that it has no home tracker, it's an automatic red flag. And then you got the 508 EVs, PP up, all moves. And I think this is what people, and you're going to see in the replies, are really kind of like hanging on to. I've been ginning and stuff like that, and I run a Discord server, and I have for years. The reason why the 508 EVs and PP Max all moves is something that is like a red flag in combination of everything else is the fact that when people have the option to gin precisely, they will gin precisely. Usually you're going to see stuff that's going to be 510, and that's because when people gin, they do like vitamins, they do, and the things like what, 10 EVs, like 1 EVs or 2 EVs, stuff like that. And they don't really care about those extra 510, but it's like I said, I can go to my Discord right now and probably see most of the EV spreads when people are ginning, like 90% are probably going to be 508 and PP Max all moves. That is also kind of like a little
Yeah,
red flag. Go ahead.
yeah. I'm sorry to cut you off,
No, you're
but
good.
yeah, because when I thought about the ribbons too, it's like, what's the whole point of having ribbons? Like, it doesn't
Exactly.
really do anything for like what the hell. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, like the 508 EVs and PP Max, like, yeah, we get it. Like, that's pretty much what people will drag you on. Of course, that may be true or not because getting access to such, vitamins and, PP ups and maxes is not really that hard because nowadays Pokemon VGC is becoming a bit more accessible for the general, audience of these games. But yeah, like you mentioned, like it's just all about the information that you have. Would I trust somebody that is genning a Pokemon for me, even though, that's already a risk, involved in that situation? Do I really understand what PKHeX does to my Pokemon? Are they like I'm surprised like if their Pokemon are getting flagged at this stage, like you should have just done like a brief check off like on like a separate Wi-Fi zone or whatever, just to see whether it passes the general Pokemon games hack checks before going into Worlds. Like, unless because if these were flagged red, I would assume that happens. I know there are special cases. Like, there's been weird instances where, like, for example, a shiny Hoopa, which is a shiny locked Pokemon, it bypasses their checks and all that. I've seen it personally myself. I wonder like if they hopefully they pre-tested their Pokemon gen prior to like sending it out to Worlds, or in this case the Intercontinental game. So I'm not really sure what their process is when it comes to like checking their Pokemon. I mean, I want to hope they do, but again, just seeing the superficial stuff like that's on the screen, like we know what's going on, and obviously Matt knows what's going on. And if you want to go really, really further, K Phonics knows
Yeah.
what's going on. So again, it's just we know what we see, and based on our experience, which there may be a lack of experience for such VGC participants, that we can clearly tell something is off.
Yeah, and it's like the thing is, I blanked on what I was about to say, but like the thing with like 6 IV legendaries too, like if you've watched people like It's a Blissey, he shows you how long it takes to get all this stuff. So like it's one of those things where just you don't have to do it. And like Frank said about the ribbons, like those ribbons are so unnecessary. And it's just like you're blinging it out. You're putting diamonds on a porta potty, like it's like it doesn't make any difference. You're just blinging out something that is already going to get you flagged, and it's just like, and for basically all this stuff, and I think this is another thing where people don't really understand. There's two different hack checkers primarily. Like all this stuff on this list will pass the in-game hack checker, so that's probably what they did to be like, oh hey, this is legal. But the hack checker you really
Yeah.
need to pay attention to is the home hack checker. And the home hack checker
Yeah.
basically, what home does is home verifies whether or not your home tracker is legit. I don't really know how they're checking it at the tournaments. I don't know if they have like something on hand with them because like I don't know. Nobody's really passing information on to me about how they're doing it. But from what people have told me is that like the home tracker, and I'm not saying to do this, the home tracker check at like tournaments is only just checking for the presence of a home tracker. It's not actually like verifying whether it's legit. Now that could change in the future, so don't think to keep getting away with this. But it's one of those things where it's just so easy to get around it. It's so easy just if you want to gen it in Sword and Shield, go through home, and then do all the applicable stuff in Scarlet and Violet. It's so easy. Like it's just like it's so much harder, in my opinion, to get caught like with bad Pokemon than it is to just make legal easy Pokemon. Like it just makes no
Yeah.
sense to me. Like and so just to kind of like we spent a lot of time on the body of this tweet, but just to kind of like look at some of the replies and just see like some of the things that kind of stood out to me when I was on Twitter earlier. And like this guy here, like I said, when I see somebody on Twitter and I'm reading their tweets, it's nothing personal. Please, if you see this video, I've had people get mad at me before. Don't take it personal. I'm just using this for context and just to more so further educate people in the video. So this guy said, the literal only thing you said here that makes sense is the trash bites, and all the other stuff is not concrete evidence as to the team being ginned, and is a little silly to mention. For example, we wouldn't really be good competitive players if we didn't PP max our moves. So, in all honesty, he's kind of got that backwards. So, when it
Yeah.
comes to like legality, the least significant thing is going to be the trash bites, because the trash bites are things that only people who have like access to PKHeX can even see. Some of these other things you can actually see in game, and like he does correct himself later on. He brings up about he doesn't bring up home trackers, and the fact that like instead of like looking at like the totality of the list, and that's the point I'm trying to make, people are kind of homing in to little individual things to try and pick apart certain things. And that's when like if you're it just seems like some people aren't really willing to have that conversation. Like home trackers should be the main thing if you're a VGC player that you harp in on. Don't harp in on like, oh, PP max our moves. And then like Matt goes on and he is like, hey, please go ahead and elaborate on how you can get a Tornadus and Urshifu in SV without a home tracker. I'd love to know. The rest are highly improbable. Why would someone go out of their
Yeah.
way to breed a Grookey in SV, then send it back to get Swish Battle Tower ribbons? And again, improbable doesn't mean hacked, but when you stack it on top of everything, it's and you're asking for it to be hack checked. So a good hack checker is going to he's going to lay it all out for you. I mean, he could have maybe worded it better because again, Matt understands even more than like me and Frank. So it's just like he could have worded it better and like it's gonna sound bad to kind of like dumb it down and water it down so it's more digestible to anyone else. But like for me, reading that list, I know what he's talking about. But for people who kind of lack an understanding of legality, it might go right over their head.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest issues that I've where people were on my channel talking about in the worlds, and they were saying, "Hey, I want to use Urshifu because obviously Urshifu has tremendous VGC value, but I don't have access to a Sword and Shield or even the DLC that came with it. Like, how would you circumvent that?" And it's like, well, assuming that you have friends or you probably are in a community where people will give out Pokemon, you can simply ask for one, and then if someone has PKHeX, you can ask them like, "Hey, I want this to be checked. Does everything look good? Did this come from the actual game itself?" And of course, there's I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole because once you start seeing the actual meta games of VGC, you're gonna need more than just Scarlet and Violet or the latest Pokemon games to compete. And obviously now it's becoming an accessibility quote unquote issue because you need to have these games like Legends Arceus to get a specific Pokemon with a specific move, or have the DLC of a game back in the day in order to get like Urshifu and all the other stuff. So again, it's all about being informative. If you know what you're doing, you know what you want, you really have to put in a little bit of research. Like you can't just assume, all these Pokemon that you're getting from streamers or Discord, like they're actually 100%. Always back check your stuff in order to avoid getting trouble. And I haven't really seen anyone getting banned for like even checking stuff like this. Me personally, I've been genning action replay, all that stuff for like as long as I can remember,
Same.
and I've never gotten soft banned. I mean, the only time I ever like legit got soft banned was because I disconnected from a trade and I was soft banned for like 30 minutes, which is not a really big deal in Sun and Moon. But again, if you're experienced, you know what you're doing, always just double check the Pokemon that you always get.
Yeah, or like they can literally just like reach out to some of us that have like Discord servers, or just like talk to like, I don't know if the PKX server will be too open about like being like, hey, you come in there like, hey, how can I pass the VGC hack check? You'll probably get ignored. But like, I mean, it's there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with reaching out. Like this person did the smart thing to do. He did it too late, but he did like, hey, can somebody
Yeah.
hack check this for me? There's nothing wrong with asking questions and just like, for me, like owning a Discord server and stuff like that, so many people were just unwilling to ask questions. I'll see somebody just spam the same illegal set 10 times in a row, but they won't go to the help channel, which will help them figure it out in like less than 30 seconds. And I think that's kind of one of the things that kind of goes on here. And just like, again, like, yeah, let's say maybe you're talking to like another VGC player. When I say this, I'm serious when I say talk to someone who actually knows and understands ginning to a decent degree. If you see somebody like maybe me and Frank who have like VGC guides, not VGC, PKX guides posted on like YouTube, there's nothing wrong with like reaching out to us in the comments to get clarity. Like that is always going to be the best thing to do. But if you're asking your friend and your friend doesn't understand, now you got two people that don't understand. And that's how like misinformation in regards to like legality and stuff like spreads all the time. Like I'll be on Twitter. Like if you search up PKHeX on Twitter, I'm probably in the replies like having to kind of like correct somebody. And it's not me being like rude or anything. It's just that like misinformation spreads badly. And that's like one of the most dangerous things when it comes to like Pokemon. And like I said, me and Frank Jen, we get people in our comments and stuff like that. And there's always going to be, I'm pretty sure Frank deals with it all the time, just like me. There's always going to be somebody in the comments saying, like, hey, you're getting people banned XYZ, when it's just like, if you understand legality, you don't really jump to those conclusions. But it's just you got to be willing to want to like search out the information and be open to criticism. Like this guy, I have like so much respect for him for the fact that he was like, "Hey, can somebody hack check this for me?" But I think that like I rarely have seen anybody do that. Has anybody ever came to you to hack check, Frank?
No, not really. I don't think, as far as I know, I always tell people before like my streams or live streams, like, hey, these Pokemon are genned. Like they probably are genned. And if you think that they're not and you have a problem with it, just turn the other way. Like just be more informed about what you're getting yourself into. Because I always hated back in the day when people just started complaining, like, "Oh my God, Gen Pokemon, they're ruining Pokemon." Or is it really? I don't really think
Nope.
so. Like, if giving more Pokemon to people who don't have access to like the Pokemon they want, like if people want a shiny Greninja, like that was my first experience of like really getting a Gen Pokemon from like a live streamer, and that was really a really good feeling that I've gotten. Like, hey, there's people. I mean, obviously, I don't really care whether they're gender or not, but the fact that I have this Pokemon with me and it passes the game's legal checkers, like that's a pretty awesome feeling, and that's why I've always wanted to, give out Pokemon. But I always tell people like, hey, you're never in my 5 years of like doing giveaways, you'll ever get banned. And if you do get banned, it's probably because you did something and not me. I don't want to assume the responsibility because that's kind of like irresponsible as well. But I do tell people, hey, you know, genning Pokemon isn't like a crime. I mean, obviously, the how you do it is definitely going to break some terms and services, which that's something you have to risk on your own. But genning has always been a very controversial like topic in the Pokemon community. It's been around for since its creation essentially. And I really do think people want to be, more informed, but unfortunately people see, VGC and they're like, "Oh yeah, I know these guys are, you know, hacking or whatever." And I really hated when people use the word hacked because it doesn't really represent what Jenning and what defined as cheating. Now, obviously in VGC, if you're getting caught, hey, you cheated, man. That's just how it is. You got caught doing something you weren't supposed to do, or something that you thought you were doing the right thing, and just happens to not be, correct. But again, just like from what we saw from that team and what everyone's saying in the Twitter thread or X thread, um, just like the very superficial stuff, like the EVs, the ribbons, like we can clearly tell. But for the common casual Pokemon fan, they don't may not see it as in the same light as we do.
Yeah, and just like that's the whole thing. It's just like it's just being informed. Like just reach out to people who might know more than you. There's like I said, there's nothing wrong with it. And just like and so I'm like looking at the replies and like I always hate these when like this topic comes up. Somebody's like they do like the whole who cares? And it's just like obviously this person cares and Pokemon cares and that's why they got DQ'd and they're asking for help. Like attitudes like that really do kind of like they do kind of like push people away from seeking out help. And it really does kind of like it's I'm not saying like it's really that extreme and bad, but it doesn't add anything because it's just like this person is seeking out help for a reason and they shouldn't be kind of like put down or like get hit with who cares because they want to get help. And like that's the whole reason why a lot of us are here. And like Frank said with like me and Frank don't do stuff that's going to get people banned. Like I've been banned. It is not fun. I had 4 switches get banned because I did stuff that was bannable. And like I don't want to push that onto other people. Like I've been genning for years and genning stuff for people for years. I've never had somebody come back to me like, "Hey Larry, you got me banned." I've had people come to me and be like, "Hey, this stuff is having like home tracker issues." But the thing is like this, like I've literally told you so many times about home trackers, but you instead went to get stuff gen for yourself that lacks home tracker. So it's just like there's only so much that some of us can do, and it really does kind of come down to self accountability. Like you really got to
Yeah.
really have some self accountability of how all this stuff goes. And it's just like,
Yeah, and yeah, yeah, I'm sorry.
now
Then
you
I
could.
see like on your screen, I see the Paul Reese. Isn't he like a VGC champion as well?
I
He
think
puts
I
up a pretty
met him.
good I think he is a champion. I think he might have been a regional or a world champion, but
I
I'm pretty sure because I remember like he had like a Gastrodon or something on his thing. But he has a pretty good point. Like, why is the PP and the EVs are suspicious? Like, those are pretty easy to farm. That's something I straight up just said that
yeah
not that long ago. So someone with that, obviously we're talking to somebody who's been in VGC and has won competitions. Like, again, just people that are just not informed, and I really hate the people who like say, "Oh, who cares?" and all that stuff. It does matter to people who I hope, I mean, they're probably making a living off of,
yeah
tournament winnings. And sure, they're putting in tons of hours, building a team. So that kind of just irks me like the wrong way when it comes to saying people, "Oh, who cares?" or "You're just wasting hours." Like, well, to them, it's kind of a job, which I don't really think it should be. I hope you make an income somewhere else. But for people who are competing 24/7, who's going to regionals, nationals, intercontinentals, and eventually worlds, like it's gonna matter to them because once you like, let's say for example, you win all those tournaments, you start gaining a lot of traction, and then once you go into worlds, is where people are like, "Oh shit, like this guy's the real deal," and that's what you get a lot more fame. Like look at Wolfie. I mean,
yeah
about 6, 7 years ago when he became champion, like yeah, he built off his foundation, and now a couple of years after that, he ended up getting like a YouTube channel, and like he's like the most popular VGC, YouTuber right now. So that's something you have to take into consideration. Like if you're putting a lot of craft and effort into something like this, you're gonna get the money, you're gonna get the fame. People are gonna want to know who you are as a person, and that's how you grow as an individual, especially those competing in high stake tournaments.
exactly. And it's just like you were saying, like people are making a living off this. Like the Pokemon, like kind of like BGC community and just like competitive and just like the content creation scene as a whole in regards to Pokemon has changed up so much in the last few years. Or like a lot of these like bigger players are content creators. Like I think like Wolfie, like he said as an example, Wolfie's probably making like a living off of just a content creator for Pokemon. And so many of these guys do it. So it's just like they are invested into what they're doing, and like they do care. They do care, and they're all about like educating people and stuff like that. So it's just like it really is like defeating the purpose to be like, who cares? And like there are people who generally do care about this stuff, and they generally do like care about their community. And so like the Paul Ruiz tweet, I think he won when I was in Tennessee for Worlds. I'm not too sure. I think I met him like briefly, if that's the same Worlds, or it might have been somebody else from the same region, but I'm not too sure. But he does he words it a lot better, but he does kind of make the thing that I highlighted on earlier about just like picking at the EV and PP max point. And so he just says like, I'm surprised you think nowadays 508 EVs and PP max all moves are suspicious. Like with all the tools that have been given to us, really, we have feathers, and this generation, out of all things, those are suspicious. And this is what I kind of meant earlier. Like people were kind of like picking at single things in the list and not totality. Like again, he is completely right, but I think it's one of those things where like unless you're seeing all these things and ginning and all the telltale signs, it might not seem suspicious to you. Like I said before, as someone who owns a Discord server, I see it all the time. 508 is the most common thing when people gen their Pokemon, because a lot of times they're using stuff like Showdown to make their Pokemon. They're using like Team Builder, and they kind of know
Yep.
these two EVs don't mean anything, so they'll stop at 508. But people playing in game, they don't care, because it those two EVs don't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. So it's one of those things that we can pick up. So it's just like I think that he's approaching it the right way, but I think it's just one of those things where like you got two people talking from two different perspectives ultimately. And like I said, when it comes, I think Matt could have definitely probably worded it better, but it's just one of those things where like we're talking about the same thing, but we're looking at it through different lenses. If you're a competitor, then you know that you probably do actually go ham and do like the feathers and make sure your EVs are precise, stopping at 508. But as somebody who is experienced with PKHeX and stuff for years and Jenning, you know, hey, this is something that stands out. And I think Matt did respond to him later on in the thread. And oh yeah, he goes on again and says, I personally try to aim for 508 EVs for optimization, which, hey, that is great. And then Matt responds and says, the act of getting Pokemon with 508 total EVs in and itself is not the problem. It's the fact that it's accompanied by a bunch of other improbable stats. If the only problem were 508 EVs, I wouldn't have even batted an eye. And this is what I mean by the totality. Like, let's say if he showed me a Pokemon that had 508 EVs and nothing else is a red flag, I'd ignore it. I wouldn't flag that. I wouldn't do that. But again, if somebody's asking for a hack check, you're most likely going to be as thorough as possible.
Right. And then I just did a little background just to interject. Like Paul Reeves is a 2018 VGC champion, so world champion. So obviously he does have, some sort of pedigree. I mean, not some sort of. He has the pedigree
Yeah.
to speak. And I believe he was top 32 in this tournament that we're talking about as well. So again, he does have the persona. He does have the pedigree to talk about that kind of stuff. But again, like as Larry just mentioned, we see the 508 and it shouldn't be a big deal, but we as Jenners, people who have done this for years, like that's just like, a little scratch on the surface. Like we know something might be up. If that was the case, then and everything else was fine, then we don't give a shit. But the fact that it's a 508 and then we start seeing more and more, from the Pokemon, like yeah, there could be a little bit of miscommunication, like saying, oh, 508 means, oh yeah, you're cheating. There's no way, right? But again, what maybe it's due to EVs, how EVs are calculated in the game. I personally don't really think 510s. There's no difference, honestly, between 510s and 508s when it comes to an actual stat, because I believe you need four
Yeah.
um to actually make up for that one. But at the same time, it's just like it's not the fact that we care about a 508, but it's just the other stuff that we know that's definitely gonna have a red flag in our eyes, even though it will pass the legality checker. So it's cool to see that interaction of a world champ, if that's actually him, a world
I'm
champion,
pretty sure it's him.
with somebody, yeah, with somebody who, is very well versed in or developing, PK Hex updates and all that stuff. Because I'm also curious as to how PK Hex does their updates in regards to such things like the home tracker. Because I remember like in Sword and Shield that wasn't a problem as far as I recall, but now because Pokemon or Game Freak themselves are upping their legality checkers, I'm just curious to see how PKHeX responds to that and how those updates mirror that if they're able to. Because obviously, in order for PKHeX to be really perfect, they literally have to rip like the galley checker from Pokemon themselves, and obviously, unless they have an insider, it just doesn't seem to be the case whatsoever.
Yeah, I still kind of do think that Kurt works for Pokemon somehow, but like I mean, like, if like really to be honest, like the Pika Hex like hack checker is probably stronger than like the games because like the like so many things will get through like the games hack checker that Pika Hex will like
Yeah.
disallow, and like it's one of those things where like the home tracker stuff like nobody really cared about home trackers. Like home trackers have been an issue since they came out, but like what happened was the enforcement got stronger. So like back in Sword and Shield, if you had like bad home tracker data it would the like the Pokeball thing in the upper left hand corner. Like if
Yep.
you viewed it in home, the Pokeball be missing. So that would be an easy way to know like, hey, my Pokemon doesn't have a home tracker. But because there wasn't any actual enforcement, people were like, oh, don't care. But then with the update for Scarlet and Violet that gave home accessibility, that's when like the real like fuckery started because that's when they started changing your metadata. That's when like the home, I mean not the home, the Pokeball was gone again. And then with the next update, that's when you got the error code, was it 10015 or whatever, which pretty much just stops
Yep.
anything from coming into home with bad home tracker data. And it's just one of those things where like I remember in the PKHeX server, like some people had been saying stuff from the beginning. Make sure to pay attention to home trackers because we don't know how Nintendo and Game Freak are going to treat it. And so that's why now a lot of us that have like Discord bots, we have our bots set to where you can't gen stuff that requires a home tracker. Because at the end of the day, even though I know it's not my fault, I know somebody's going to come at me and be like, hey, you gave me something that can't go in home. I can tell you 1,000 times not to do this and you still do it, but we're going to be the ones to get blamed. And a lot of us, and like there's different servers, we all talking like PKX Jenners and like Discord bot owners talking stuff like that. And like we don't really want that on our conscience. A lot of us do this stuff for free to help y'all out. We don't do this. A lot of us don't make money off of this. Like the real content creators are like the VGC players who put out videos every single day. We just stream and give you guys free Pokemon. It's not something we do. We're not Machamps, like and stuff like that. So like we do it to out of the kindness to help y'all out. And part of that kindness actually involves not doing stuff that is going to potentially get y'all banned. Like some like streamers might do stuff that can get you banned, like Shiny Island might get people banned eventually. I don't run the risk. I do the things I know I haven't got banned with, and I know that other people are most likely not going to get banned with to make sure that the people who interact with me are safe. And I know that Frank is the exact same way. Like we stay on our P's and Q's to make sure that anything that could come from us is going to be safe.
Yeah, and I always tell my people, like, here's my discretion. Like, these may be gen, they may not be gen. Take it how you want it. But if you're just here to complain and you're just being misinformed, then you're not really winning any fight whatsoever because people understand, like, it's a pretty rampant thing. I feel like genning has hit its peak when it comes to Pokemon. It's become way more accessible.
Yeah,
People are starting to find out more about PKHeX and other whatever software that they're using nowadays, save, edit files, and all that stuff. And people are becoming more aware and more apparent when it comes to that kind of stuff. So it shouldn't really be a surprise where, like, let's say you want to do like the surprise trade feature. Like, I'm pretty sure a good chunk of those Pokemon are just going to be gent, whether you like it or not. And the other thing I like to say, like, it's kind of like if I wanted to compare, like, checking Pokemon, it's kind of like buying a car, like a used car specifically. Like, let's say, like, you approach a car and you see it has a little, ding on, let's say it's a fender or bumper. And obviously, that would lead you to believe, oh, well, this car might have been in an accident because I do see a little, fender bender going on right there. And then it would stop there. But no, you don't. you don't just stop there. You have to make sure like the frame of the car is good. You got to make sure there's nothing going on in the engine bay. You got to make sure the car is actually working. If you start finding more and more faults, I feel like that's
Yep.
a good comparison with regards to, you know, legality checking your Pokemon. Just got to do a little more research on your end before you start jumping into conclusions.
Yeah, exactly. Just like a lot of people just don't really like bother to do that, unfortunately. It's just I don't know. It's just it's like we've been trying to tell people and inform them for like forever, but some people just don't really they just don't really want to listen. It's just it kind of just like comes with the territory that people just they don't want to listen. Like they want to think that what they're doing is the correct way and that like they are on top of everything, but clearly they aren't, and it ends up coming to like bite them in the ass.
Right.
And then I think there's like a few other things. Like yeah, that's me lying to somebody else. And it's just like, and I'm not sitting here saying like people should know who Matt is, but it's always funny when people try to like act like he's just like some random or like Kurt's just some random because they're like wanted to point out the same thing. People who call themselves hack checkers all live in the past. I feel like when it's just like he's a dev. He knows probably more than like most people when it comes to like legality checkers and stuff like that. So it's definitely always funny to like see those comments. And people did make points about the whole thing with like why would you press aquajet 40 times. So it's just like again it's just things that just like they just look slightly suspicious. It's not a telltale sign, it's just something that looks slightly suspicious. That's all it is to it. Some people just
Right.
kind of make way too much out of it, and then
Yeah, and the thing with like PP maxing your moves, and like the foul play, I always hated the foul play like IV stuff because that's like literally the biggest giveaway in regards to whether or not your Pokemon are hacked or not or jammed. I would say in this case, to some people, um, the reason why, and I just talking from a competitive perspective, the reason why people PP max their moves is because they are assuming that they're going to be put in the worst situation. Because again, VGC is way more punishing if you are not prepared or team building prep. Because in 2v2s, like if you click one false move or your move runs out of PP for whatever reason because of stalling or pressure abilities like that, like it really makes the situation even worse. So I guess that's why they would want to like do all these IVs and EVs obviously makes sense because you're trying to maximize defensive and offensive calculations for Pokemon. But for PP maxing your moves, like Protect is a pretty prominent move in VGC. Um, so I understand why they would want to max it out. But again, that wouldn't be my first suspicion of a Pokemon being genned. It would be the more, you know, deep iceberg deep in the layer kind of stuff, like the ribbons or the shared OT or the date when this Pokemon was caught. So again, it's just being, aware of what you're dealing with and then understanding how VGC works. Of course they want their moves maxed out because it gives them an advantage in
yeah.
potentially winning a fight. Because what happens if it comes down to, you're on a choice scarf Pokemon, and you're locked into that move, and you got to fight your opponent and the timer, of course, because obviously all these VGC tournaments are timed. So again, that's just something for people to think about.
Yeah, just like it just really goes back to highlight like just the thing that people just don't know. Like yeah, PP maxing and stuff like that. It's great. I think like I said, it's more beneficial in singles, but like in doubles where like I say when it's timed, it doesn't really like matter too much. And this is probably like the last thing I was going to hit on. And I was actually talking to this person like right before I got into the call, and they were like, "Hey," and this just kind of like highlights what I mean when I say like a lot of people don't understand PKHeX the way they think they do. And so they were like, "Hey, I never understood if people have access to PKHeX, why not just get a modded save with 999 EV items, bottle caps, etc." Personally, I would sue the fuck out of the dude who fucked up my run for making terribly gen stuff. And so when I read that, I'm just like, this person doesn't really know how PKHeX works because if you having access to PKHeX doesn't mean you have access to a hack save file. And I think that's one of the common things that people kind of like misunderstand. Like whenever you see like a PKX guide or something like anywhere, a lot of people are like, "Hey, do I need a hack switch? Oh, I need a hack switch." You just like, no, you don't need a hack switch. It's just that people automatically assume it. Like I've got hacks. I don't think the last time like I actually used my save file in like PKHeX was maybe like 6 months ago. I don't need to do it to actually use PKHeX. And just like a lot of people don't really seem to understand that. And like I pointed out to them, like having access to PKHeX doesn't mean you have access to editing a save file. Probably 1% of PKHeX users actually have hack switches, and that's pretty accurate because like hack switches, like yeah, there's a lot of them, but you can probably find there's probably not as many as you think when it comes to like just using like PKHeX comparatively. And so he commented, and like we had a good discourse and stuff like that. I think it's the other reply, and he was just like, it literally does what you can edit your bag inside PKX to max your items, and you need a hack switch to PKX in the first place. And like I said, this is the thing that a lot of people just assume they're often wrong on. And I'm just like, hey, don't need a hack switch to PKX. You can use PKX and never interact with your save file. Plenty of us don't ever touch it, but to really optimize PKX, you're gonna need a hack switch, but you don't need it at all. And then he replied to me again. I was like, hey, most people just use PKX to make stuff, then use a bot to have it sent to them. And he's like, oh, that's completely different. If you use a trade bot, that's kind of asking for it since you can't do the correct checks, etc. And most bots like Twitch bots are blacklisted as is. And this is one of those other things where just like it's misinformation. I have no idea this whole like blacklisting thing is. Like if we were blacklisted some kind of way, like we'd probably be banned already, which they can easily do if they wanted to. Just Google Discord server and just find us in like 5 minutes if they were. So like this is what I mean like about misinformation kind of spreads. Like there's servers. I'm pretty sure you're listed there too. I've been listed there for like 3 years. The official like Scarlet and Violet server. They have like a list of like people that send out hack stuff. You're
Oh yeah,
probably
I think I've been there. I've been there for quite a while. Yeah,
yeah.
I think I've been there for quite
I'm
a while now. Yeah, I from the interaction from the guy you're putting on X, I understand what he's coming from, saying like, hey, if you're messing up your EVs and IVs, why don't you just do like just gen the items that help you with that? I understand that perspective, but again, it ultimately comes down to the Pokemon itself. Like, let's
yep,
say you get a Urshifu from somebody and it's all messed up, and you just first of all, if you're editing the items in, you can just check the Urshifu just to see whether it's fucked up or not.
yep.
And second, even if you put all the like the bottle caps and the vitamins and all that stuff, I mean, if it gets flagged, then none of that really matters. You're just kind of wasting time. You just got to know what you're doing ultimately.
Yeah, and it's just like the rest of the thread, and like he meant about the whole you can't do the correct checks, etc. Like I said, when you were talking about PKX, like it's already doing the checks for you. And this is what I mean when like people sometimes have like a limited or like kind of like a tunnel vision view of like genning, and like they probably only know like Barry Chan and like Oaks Labs and like not a lot of the other things that go on. So just like I said, if I was somebody that gen stuff, I would be in so many different servers. I wouldn't just stick to one place and then like you just see their overall perspective on things. Because even though I did say you should probably reach out to like people that own servers, I would say this, and like hopefully none of them get mad at me. Some of the people that own servers don't know what the fuck they're doing either. Like there's been plenty of
Yeah.
times where like there's some people they just like their knowledge is limited to just have only goes as far as having a hack switch. They are oftentimes getting assisted with like legality. They don't understand legality. They don't know how to gen stuff properly. And so the bad part of that is like that gets passed on to their users. Because when you are somebody that like owns it, you kind of get viewed as like this kind of like center of knowledge. But when like the center of knowledge is bad, it kind of like it's fruit of the poisonous tree, basically. And a lot of times, like you got to go back and correct that. Like I've had it happen in my server where somebody's like, "Hey, well, this person that owns this server said this," and I'm just like, "Well, no disrespect to them, they don't know what they're talking about." And just like it just kind of like it really does kind of like breed a lot of like misinformation. And it's like I said, it's really good to see people actually reach out and be like, "Hey, can I get a hack check?" Like, "Hey, I got this question and this question about this," and That's kind of how I tied it up. And then I was like, yeah, it's all good. There's a lot of misunderstandings with PKX and legality as a whole. So like, and I explained the trash bites, which I talked about earlier. It's just like trash bites happen when you try to make these changes over top of like a pre-existing OT, when literally the program can do all that stuff for you automatically, and you have no reason to think about trash bites. Like, yeah, so think about it. There's so many people who don't even use ALM. Like, it's just
Yeah, no one does.
it's wild. Like, there's so many things that, like, because we do this stuff all the time, it's commonplace to us. It's normalized. Like, I don't even think I've updated my ALM in like maybe like 3 updates, because I don't need it, because I know what I'm doing and stuff like that. And like, it's ALM helps out a lot of people, but not everybody needs it. And it's just like, it's one of those things where like it does help you a great deal. And I think that was probably the last thing I really wanted to like address about the whole situation. We kind of got like way from like the whole initial like DQ to like really talking about like other stuff.
Yeah, and just to wrap it up on my end, like again, I'm always for Jenning because of what it gives back to the to Poketubers and everyone else who wants Pokemon that are not accessible anymore. As long as it's legal, as long as it passes the checks, I wouldn't have any issue. And of course, like I mentioned, you know, and throughout this video, like the issue with Jenning versus not Jenning in the Pokemon community, it's always going to be a fight, like till the end of times, because it's always been that kind of topic. I don't think there has been any more bigger controversial topic than Jenning or cheating or hacking, however people want to call it nowadays. Um, I'm not saying like, hey, Jenning should be legal, because I do have that perspective of giving back to the community, and that's something I always wanted to do. I know people's opinions might be a little different on that, but at the same time, if you are a VGC player, to sum it up, like just be aware, do research. At least this guy had the balls to like show his team and say, "Hey, can someone do a hack check for me?" Now, I think the reason why he did it after is because if he did it
Yeah.
before, that's a little suspicious. Like, "Hey, what you doing, buddy?" Especially when you're in top 8, that's a pretty
Hey, he would have had
a
he,
good climb.
he would have had
He has a good
5K.
chance. Would have. I mean, looking at his team, it looks like he had a good chance because he pretty much has like the VGC beaters on his team. But again, just be more informative. Do research. Don't just assume that you're getting a Pokemon that is good. Backtrack it. Hey, where does this Pokemon come from? How'd you get it? If you're genning it, can you make sure everything's correct? Is it going to pass the actual legality checkers? Probably not. But at the same time, hey, can you make sure the home tracker's there? Everything looks legit. Is there anything that makes me want to believe that it will get me banned? It's just being more informed, doing research will solve, I would say, like a good 95% of your
Yeah.
problems when it comes to team building for Worlds. And of course, PKHeX is free. Pokemon Showdown is free. Smogon is free. There's a lot of resources out there that can help you out with that kind of stuff. All it takes, again, is just going online, doing a simple Google search, and problem solved. Simple as that.
Yeah, and that's now I remember what I wanted to bring up earlier. Sorry, kind of like extend this another like 5 minutes, but like
You're good. You're good. You're good.
so the conversation around like Genning has like really changed. Like Frank brought up like accessibility, because like back in like Gen 6, Genning by VGC players, they were not this open. They were not this open at all, because there was
Yeah.
less accessibility. Now it's just like there's a gen bot, you can throw a rock and hit 3 gen bots, and like it's so easy to find in accessibility. That's where a lot more people are open. And I feel like one of the main reasons why people were less open back then is just mainly just, I feel like it might have been a little bit of envy involved, because just like, hey, I can't do this, so you shouldn't either. But now it's turned in like, hey, I can do this, so yeah, everybody should do it. And it's just like, it's it makes sense, but it's a dangerous kind of road to go down. And it's just, I think people are going to really miss Jenning when it goes back to how it was, because the next mainline game is probably going to be like on the next system. We have no idea if that's going to be
Yeah.
hackable. All of us could be gone, and you're going to see a lot of people. You're going to get back to like you had like that one person that gen for everybody. Like, do you remember Pearl?
I remember Pearl. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so like you get that one person who gens for everybody's, and then like, and even then they can mess up. So it's just like, and when there's less accessibility, there's less knowledge kind of going around, and that's when like there's less knowledge, more misinformation. So it's just like you really like I don't think people realize like how good they have it. Me personally, I'm kind of ready for Jing to be done. I can stop all this, like not deal with a bunch of like annoying kids and stuff. But it's just like I do
Mhm.
understand like the benefit it has been to the community as a whole, and I think that people want to really realize that like it's helped out a lot. All these 6 IV dittos, thank a Jenner,
Yeah.
even if it's a raid, we're doing that intentionally. Like it's all these things really do help, and like people really do take for granted just how much ginning has improved the overall experience. Now if like let's say they move straight to simulator, which I would hope they would eventually do, then like yeah, there would honestly probably be no reason to gin. Well, at least for like competitive sense, you still have people wanting to gin and get stuff for themselves, like personal use, and like I don't shiny hunt or do anything with the games except for Jennings. So my perspective on like people having like, oh, this means a lot to me and stuff like that is different from other people. So it's just like I can't really speak on that too much, but I definitely think that even if Jennings was like gone, there's still going to be a lot of people who are going to miss it for reasons outside of like competitive, just because of the accessibility and the things that it gave to them.
Yeah, and if I recall, like just to put the timeline in perspective when it comes to PKHeX and Pokemon games, I think it took them about a week to have an initial like PKHeX update for compatibility of Scarlet and Violet. I don't recall Sword and Shields. I think it might have taken a little longer because again, that was like the first mainline official
Yeah,
game on the Nintendo Switch for Pokemon. I think it took like about I actually want to say it took them about a couple weeks. So obviously that's with the Switch, and we already had Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and that's also a genable game as well. For the next supposed Nintendo Switch, we're going to have, there's always going to be someone out there. I'm pretty sure Matt or Kphonics, they're going to be on it as always. It takes time to build a program like this. I mean, it's all coding ultimately.
yeah,
So, and just from my perspective, at least what I would like what I like seeing from Pokemon. I always, criticize Game Freak and Pokemon for how the franchise has been going lately, but at least they're trying to push the community into playing VGC. They've given us from comparing to like Generation 6, which to me would be like the booming of Pokemon to like now, things have been very, very different for the good. Like we had access to egg moves, transferable egg moves. We have, the bottle caps, we have IV training. I mean, they given us a whole bunch, even like changing abilities to hidden abilities with the items, which is a godsend nowadays. But I do think like, Pokemon, at least they're trying to push that accessibility into BGC more. But at the same time, they do have the right to say, hey, we're giving you all of this. And if you're still genning and you're getting caught, I mean, that's on you.
yep. I just wish they pushed that accessibility to singles. I miss playing on my Switch, and I just miss competitive as a whole. But that's I'll
Yeah,
end
I
it
don't
there.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't even play like singles anymore because first of all, the graphics fucking suck and the timer is still a pretty big issue. I know there's a way where you can change that timer to 60 minutes, but I think it's like a friendly competition kind of thing where everyone
Yeah,
just jumps in. But I just think them like gutting singles is just hasn't really been that great of an experience in this generation. I think this is probably the game or the Pokemon game itself where I've spent way less time. Like even Legends Arceus, like that was super fun. Like I would
yeah,
prefer something like that, but of course there's no competitive value besides getting the Pokemon transferred. So that's that for me.
yeah. Well, so that's it. Like, I mean, any questions? Just make sure to ask us. I mean, I think we covered a lot, like way past like the original topic. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if you got anything to close with, Frank.
No, I would say go ahead and check out my channel. I usually do giveaways. It's been kind of bland lately doing giveaways because there hasn't been a lot of attention. I think YouTube is catching on with the algorithm lately. So unless there's like a new Pokemon game coming out, like I don't know. I've never been a fan of the algorithm, so There's that. Just check out my channel if you guys want to. I always have videos talking about this. I'll probably have my own video about this too, but if more people are getting DQ'd, I'll probably be the first one to talk about
Yeah,
it. But I just wanted to do a video with Larry. We haven't had a video, done together in quite a while.
yeah,
So glad glad to be in this one.
yeah. We literally just hit an hour. But yeah, appreciate it, Frank, and y'all have a good day.